So what if I told you that the same developers who made Super Smash Bros. Was also responsible for creating this Counter-Strike game? And what if I told you that there was another entire Counter-Strike game that you guys have probably never even heard of before? But before we get into that, let's start from the very beginning. So Counter-Strike was actually kind of a mistake. Well, not really a mistake, but it wasn't even supposed to be a full-on game. Counter-Strike was actually a mod created for the infamous Valve game Half-Life, and it was developed by Min Lee and Jess Cliff, who would spend around 20 hours a week working on developing the mod and eventually released the beta version in June of 1999. The mod obviously quickly gained popularity and went through multiple beta versions before actually being acquired by Valve themselves in 2000. Valve also hired both Min and Jess to work with them in continuing the development of the game. Something that was perhaps even more surprising was how quickly the game actually turned into a competitive esport. Ever since 2000, Counter-Strike tournaments have been hosted around the entire world, with the first ever Counter-Strike major being hosted in 2001. Now, CPL Winter 2001 was incredible in a lot of ways, and one of these was actually the prize money. Back then, the tournament boasted a prize pool of $150,000, which was actually incredible for what simply started as a mod for another game. And nowadays, we see prize pools of over $500,000 pretty regularly, and it isn't surprising considering how much Counter-Strike has grown. According to esportsearnings.com, the total accumulated prize pool across all CS tournaments since the first major at the CPL in Texas has totaled a whopping $184.5 million spread over 8,468 tournaments. Obviously, this is an accumulation of thousands of tournaments varying in scale, but the largest tournament ever in terms of prize money was the PGL Stockholm 2021 CSGO Major. This tournament was the first Counter-Strike major hosted after lockdowns had passed, and due to this, Valve, who is the developer of Counter-Strike, decided to double the usual prize pool to an incredible $2 million. It may even be possible that we do reach that kind of scale again at a future Counter-Strike major, considering from the year 2023 alone, Valve made $980 million as a result from just case key purchases. So from 1 year alone, Valve made close to $1 billion from Counter-Strike. This has always been a big revenue source for Valve, but perhaps we should talk about some more of the Counter-Strike development that you may not know about and some of their ups and downs. Anyone who's been playing the game for quite some time knows that CS has had different versions over the years, with CS 1.6 for the people who were looking for more of the classic experience, CS Source being the update that Valve's Source engine was introduced, and CSGO being most iconic of them all, and of course, the newly released Counter-Strike 2. But did you know that there were even more versions of Counter-Strike that were released or were in development? In 2004, just a year before CS Source, Ritual Entertainment released Counter-Strike Condition Zero, and this one is a little bit more popular and you may have heard of this, as it was just a follow-up to the original Counter-Strike and it still used the original Gold Source engine. The reviews of the game ended up being lackluster, however, and Valve quickly pulled the game from release and handed it over to Turtle Rock Studios for development. However, during its second release in March 2004, the game quickly got overshadowed by the later CS Source release and was eventually abandoned. A year after the release of Source, an arcade version was released named Counter-Strike Neo, and this was published by Bandai Namco, who you may actually recognize as the game development studio behind games such as Tekken and, more iconically, Super Smash Bros. Counter-Strike Neo was different from your traditional Counter-Strike game. It featured its own unique maps, faction, and settings, and the game was specifically developed for the audience in Japan, who were more accustomed to an arcade cabinet style of gaming. The game also had more of an anime type look to its characters, and one of the craziest details about this game was that it even had its own visual novels called Counter-Strike Neo White Memories, which is pretty crazy considering that Japan isn't necessarily a huge region for Counter-Strike nowadays. And this wasn't even the only version of Counter-Strike that you may be unfamiliar with either. In 2008, the Korean company Nexon, who is also a major developer in the Korean space, released a version of Counter-Strike based on the original game called Counter-Strike Online. This version introduced a female character, a whole load of new weapons and weapon skins, which you had to pay for with microtransactions. However, seeing the game now, it's hard to even see the original Counter-Strike within it. The game was actually successful though, and it was enough to warrant a sequel named Counter-Strike Online Online 2, and a spin-off named Counter-Strike Nexon Studio. Counter-Strike Nexon Studio is an MMO FPS that Nexon itself describes as a game that takes the world-famous shooter and injects it with a dose of the undead, adding in unstoppable zombie hordes, gruesome game modes, and unspeakable horrors. Honestly, this game does not look like Counter-Strike at all, and I think that Nexon is just using the CS name as a method to gain an audience, and to be fair, it did kind of work. The game currently still has a peak of around 800 players, and of course that's nothing near what Counter-Strike has become, but it still enjoys some form of popularity within the Asian scene. Well, that's all for this first video on some Counter-Strike facts. If you wanted to see a part 2 of this video, let us know down in the comments and we will try and find some more interesting facts for you guys. Subscribe to keep up with our content and like the video if you enjoyed it. Peace out.